So hello everybody, today is Thursday the 5th of October 2023. I'm with Chris Coverdale and Lee Kant and we're carrying on. This is number 4 and over to Chris for the introduction of what this particular episode is going to be about. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Really what I think is important to emphasize is that I'm all about solutions. What can we do to stop what is going on and to bring about a different type of society, a different society. Now, broadly, I've been focusing on 5, 6, 7 main areas of work. Now, the first one that we've talked about is the tax resistance and stopping paying taxes and doing it lawfully through taxation trusts. We need to get that going all around the country and eventually around the world. The second one is to set up community cooperatives, the legal structures which will enable people to work together locally in community to achieve a decent society locally. We don't want all our orders coming down from a central body who know nothing about the effects that they're having on the rest of the world and our communities. So setting up effectively multi-stakeholder community co-ops. The third area is to organize the prosecution, both criminal and civil, if you like, prosecutions of our leaders, particularly the financial leaders, the bankers and investors and others who are handing huge sums of money to the government, which enables them to wage wars, to engage in medical genocide and other things. So going into detail about the prosecutions. The fourth one is that we have to do something to encourage a lawful mutiny. Our troops have been following the orders of our governments for the last 300 years, regardless of whether those orders are legal or illegal. And the Second World War and the Nuremberg war crimes trials made it quite clear that troops must disobey the orders of their government when those orders are illegal in international law, in contravention of all the rules and laws that we've made worldwide. So those initially are the 4. We then need to look at methods of organizing local parliaments. We need, instead of having one central parliament for 65 million of us in Britain, making all the decisions about the laws and so on, we need to make our own laws. And so we need to set up local parliaments in every constituency in this country. And so that's another area we need to perhaps go into. And that probably is about enough for the moment. There are things we've got to do in terms of the media as well, and to make sure that the media and the large corporations are under our control and not under the control of a few elite shareholders and others. So broadly, those are the overall situations that I feel that we need to work on if we are to bring about a transformation from the current tyranny to a decent, humane democracy. So what would you like to concentrate on today?
Well, I wanted to go back on the timeline. So the United Nations Charter and the United Nations Act was set up for these governments, countries to do, member states to do various things which they failed to do. Then the International Court of Justice was meant to to ensure compliance under the UN Charter, which they failed to do. And then the countries had started to pretend that they were going to do everything honorably, which they didn't do. So they pretended that they've committed all these crimes, mass murder, genocide, and aggression. Aggression is what when somebody breaks your front door and kidnaps you, surely that's aggression. And so this is a war crime. This is what I want remedy to stop these ongoing daily crimes against the people by their governments. What can we do about that to make us safe? Because I don't feel safe.
Yeah, so I think we have to distinguish between international actions where one country attacks another country, invades or occupies another country, and injures and kills its citizens and destroys its property and so on. That really is the purpose of the United Nations Charter, is to do with the relationships between states. Now, your particular reference there was to stop our own doors being knocked down by the police or the military in Britain and invading and occupying our spaces and really militating against, not militating against it, but being really harmful to the people of this country. So the laws relevant to that are much more the domestic criminal laws that we have made in this country over the last 300 or 400 years. And we need to make sure they are operating. At the moment, they don't operate. Neither the government or the police nor the corporations really uphold and enforce the laws that we've got in this country to keep us safe and to build and create a decent community. So we'll have to do something about changing the legal structures and systems in this country and updating them, because most of them are still operating on 18th, 19th century methods rather than 21st century decency. So just building on that, the reason why we want to go into a taxation refusal process and put our money in taxation trusts is all to do with the criminal offenses that our government has been committing, or our leaders have been committing against other nations. As you referred to the International Court of Justice, just remembering that that was set up in order to help nations hold other nations to account. And we've never been able to do that. And the court itself has not operated to that function. So that's why we then set up the International Criminal Court in The Hague, which enabled people everywhere to hold our leaders to account if they broke the laws of war. So it's very important to understand that the International Court of Justice is about holding nations to account, but we have no methodology for doing that. But the International Criminal Court is holding leaders to account, and it's far more effective to hold the leaders who make the decisions than a general statement against a country saying you can or cannot do that. It doesn't come down to forcing those who take the decisions to take decent decisions. So this is why the benefit of the International Criminal Court is there. Now, we can bring all of those actions of the International Criminal Court are only brought into and only function when a country has ratified the Rome Statute and brought it into its own legislation. We did that with the International Criminal Court Act. Now, the three main crimes, well, there are now 4 crimes. Initially, it was 3 crimes: war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. But they added a 4th crime in 2017, a crime of aggression. And you mentioned aggression, and that is quite deliberately linked to military aggression and the aggression of one country against another, or one set of armed forces against another country. So it is going to war, basically, and it took them many years to come to an agreement on what we mean by a crime of aggression. We now have that definition. We can't use it in terms of domestic material when a police officer bursts into your home and tries to seize, bailiffs tries to seize your possessions or anything else like that. So aggression is really the international military crime when you go into another country in an aggressive way rather than supporting them. There is a difference between, one of the important things that people don't know is that war is always illegal. It is a criminal offense to wage war, and that is a universal crime around the world and applies in every situation of armed conflict. People say, well, surely some wars are legal. No, no war is ever legal. The use of armed force to defend a nation against attack from outside is lawful under Article 51 of the UN Charter. But war itself is never legal. One or other or both of the competent nations will be committing criminal offenses and breaking the law that we've agreed in 1928, the Treaty for the Renunciation of War. So bring it right back down to what can we do in Britain is we need to look at in detail at the criminal offences contained in the International Criminal Court Act relating to harm to individuals. Now, the crime of genocide isn't just related to warfare. War crimes are crimes that take place as part of a war. Crimes against humanity and genocide can take place outside of a war in other ways. So, for instance, the crime of genocide can be committed if one kills or causes the death of or injuries to a large number of people who are members of a national group, so that we can commit genocide not only by attacking another nation and bombing them and killing hundreds of thousands of people or thousands of people, but we can commit genocide against our own people by knowingly injecting them with toxic inoculations. And that certainly seems to me to have happened in the last few years. So what has happened to the people in this country can be, our leaders can be prosecuted for that under the International Criminal Court Act regulations relating to genocide. And so it may be worthwhile going into that in a little bit more detail to enable people to know what to do to prosecute leaders for genocide or for aiding and abetting genocide. That includes providing the means for the commission of the crime. Would that be a useful thing to do? Just briefly to go into detail on that, or was that would you prefer to move on to other things?
No, that's fine by me, Chris. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's just go into the legislation introduced in Britain was the International Criminal Court Act, Elements of Crimes Regulations, 2001. And in that, it details how to convict a person of all the different crimes in the International Criminal Court Act. And there are about 60 or 70 particular definitions of the crime. So genocide can be committed in a number of ways. And one of the very first ones is genocide by killing. And if you look at the details for genocide by killing, there are 4 criteria which have to be proved in court in order to convict an individual of the crime of genocide by killing. Those four are that the first one is that members, that somebody, one or more persons has been killed, or that you cause the death of one or more persons. The second one is that the victim was a member of a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. The third one is to do with the intent that you have in causing the killing. Was it done intentionally and not accidentally? And the fourth one is that it is done as part of a widespread policy or strategy. Now, if we can prove all of those four things, that in court, with clear evidence beyond reasonable doubt, that the crime has been committed, then you can convict a person of genocide. The difficult one is the third one. Let me just quickly go through for examples of all four. The first one, let's take as applied to the Afghan and Iraq wars. Genocide was committed because one or more persons was killed. We caused the death of, the perpetrator caused the death of one or more persons. Now, we know that nearly 1 million people were killed in the Iraq war alone, and certainly 300,000 Afghans were killed in our invasion and occupation of Afghanistan. So that really meets the first condition. The fact that they were members of a national group, they were Afghans or Iraqis, is quite clear, and we can prove that with their passports and the local evidence. So that's the second one killed. We killed them because they were living in Afghanistan or Iraq, not because they'd done anything to us or that they were causing problems. It was just straightforward genocide. The third one is the intent. Now, that's the important one in court. It's rather similar to if you take a person, say if I was driving a car and I killed a person, you know, by my driving too fast or whatever, and I could be taken to court and the police can charge me with murder or manslaughter. Now, if they think I did it deliberately, they'll charge me with murder. If they do that, then I can say, well, no, it was totally accidental. You know, there's no proof of me doing it deliberately. I did not intentionally kill that person. It was an accident. I was driving too fast. I admit that, or whatever it was. So the defense is that it was manslaughter and not murder. Now, in relation to the Iraq war, a good example of that was the intent was quite clearly laid out by our leaders. The intent to kill and to cause the deaths of Iraqi citizens. So, for instance, in the Iraq war debate, Jack Straw closed the debate, having been opened by Tony Blair. There was 6 hours of debate, I think. And then it was closed by the Foreign Secretary, who was Jack Straw. He was the last person to speak before they went into the lobbies to vote either aye or no. He said in his speech, now there will be consequence. We know there will be consequences. Some of our troops may be killed or will be killed. So too will innocent Iraqi civilians. I urge you to vote with the government tonight. Now that demonstrates clear intent to kill innocent Iraqi civilians. The horrifying part of it was that then 412 MPs went to vote in favor. They were all in favor of killing innocent Iraqi civilians. Now that is clear proof of intent to commit genocide. The fourth criteria is that it is part of a widespread policy. And so, you know, it was a war and we were doing it all the time. It wasn't just a one-off killing that might have been accidental. In fact, what happened was that we had at least 40,000 armed attacks on the people of Iraq whilst our troops were in Iraq. Now, if you do anything 40,000 times, that proves your intent to injure or kill innocent Iraqi civilians. So that's a quick run through of the criteria related to genocide. And that relates to military activities. But exactly the same 4 criteria apply to the application of in medical experimental injections to the British people over the last 2-3 years, whatever it's been. So if you knowingly, what happened was in the Second World War, Mengele, Dr. Mengele and others experimented on prisoners, and quite a lot of them died as a result of the experimentation. And in the Nuremberg War Crimes Tribunal, after the war, they were convicted of crimes. And the judgment and the judges came out with what's called the Nuremberg Code, which says that you may never experiment on other people without their fully informed consent. And it's that fully informed consent that of the British people, of the potential consequences of taking these injections that has never been raised by the government and been ignored, and we have never had fully informed consent. Now that we know that a good percentage of these injections cause serious injury and death, then we now have the opportunity of holding those who set up the project to account in court for genocide. And the same 4 criteria can be proved in court. So that's really what the whole area of bringing prosecutions is all about. We need to start pushing back at the way our government has been committing these horrendous crimes in our name with our money. And not only do we need to stop the money to stop it happening, but we've got to put those responsible for it into court to answer for their crimes. And if they are convicted by a jury, then they need to be punished and sent to prison. And that could be for up to 30 years, according to the legislation. So that's really the overall thing about how important it is to start prosecutions against our leaders. Now, the second main area of that, which is even more important, is the funding of genocide. And that falls completely under the aiding and abetting the genocide. So, for instance, every taxpayer since 2001 has been unwittingly funding the murder of Afghans, Iraqis, Libyans, Syrians, in the Yemen, Palestinians, and Ukrainians, just by paying tax.
Sorry, can I just make the point that I don't believe that they had voluntarily paid it. They were forced to pay it. So it was an extortion for fear of their life. So I think we have a defense there. But the banks, where the banks have been excused their crimes because they do the funding in a big amount.
Yes, broadly, we do actually all have the opportunity of not paying tax, but we are compelled by the system in this country to pay it. You're quite right. But that is less and less the case as you go up the system to the hierarchy, if you like. So the banks unknowingly and investors and the elite investors behind BlackRock and others are have been authorizing and funding warfare for 150 years. They do it quite deliberately because it is the most profitable thing they can do, is start wars. And so they fund and start wars. And so we can really hold our leaders to account, our financial leaders in the banks, in the large investment organizations, large companies and others, who knowingly hand over huge sums of money to the government, knowing that some of it will be used to fund warfare.
Can I just say that I want to make a little joke
Yep.
about what you're saying? Is it like, you know, the cartoon Tom and Jerry?
Yeah.
It's like you know, Tom the cat is chasing the mouse, the Jerry, and Tom never catches Jerry, but there's always this thing going on. I feel like, you know, humanity has been playing this Tom and Jerry with their governments. The governments are trying to catch them and kill them basically, but you know, we try to find ways of hiding, and so, but the government will be immune to, or we can never turn around and say, look, you're doing this wrong, you know, you're meant to serve and protect me, you're chasing me all the time. So the whole system is shattered because all those promises of the 1928, the 1945, the courts, they've all failed us. Till today, we still have whistleblowers in prisons, political prisoners. We have attacks on whistleblowers. This policy is not going to change. When we say that this so and so said, well, he thought that there was weapons of mass destruction. He thought, you know, Tony Blair thought that, you know, it was a suspicion he had, and now they can go and break your door and kill you for under suspicion of something or other. So this word suspicion kind of is the Tom and Jerry thing, is we're not going to be able to nail them down. You know, even if we can prove criminal intent and ill intent, they would just say, well, I you know, I have a mental illness, then they'll get out of it.
I don't think. I think that's not the case. We can quite clearly prove that they knew at the time. If we go into the legislation, they may try to say they were mad, if you like, insane, as a defense. That really won't hold for the top 1,000 people in this country. They knew perfectly well. It took a year to plan to invade Iraq, a few, maybe up to that, to prior to Afghanistan, to get all the troops and submarines and everything else out to Indian Ocean and so on. So they planned this in detail and supported by hundreds of thousands of civil servants and others, members of the armed forces and so on. So I don't quite relate it to the Tom and Jerry analogy that you put there. I think the point about it is that Tom constantly catches the Jerrys of the world, murders them and eats them, disposes of them, and gets away with it as the overbearing governments of these our countries, in particular Britain, America, Israel and others, and France and Germany and so on. So the real issue for me is that the claims that they didn't mean to do it, or that they were insane, or that they have immunity, state immunity, do not exist, and all can be disposed of by looking at the detail in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court and the International Criminal Court Act. I came across a document issued by the Ministry of Justice, which it's called the Investigation and Prosecution of Crimes of Universal Jurisdiction. And basically it refers to war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide and aggression. Now, in that document, they start off by saying, of course, the British government always upholds the law and so on. But halfway through the document, they then say that there is immunity for state officials, which is complete rubbish. It is false, incorrect information. Article 27 of the Rome Statute makes it absolutely clear that this statute applies to heads of state, government officials, members of parliament, military commanders, and the whole lot. And every one of these people can be held to account both under the Rome Statute internationally in The Hague and under the International Criminal Court Act at the Old Bailey. And so we need to make sure that what they say they are doing and why they're doing it is contradicted and put into its context, if you like, as an excuse for continuing that does not apply, and they are constantly breaking every one of the laws that we've agreed. And we need to prove that in court. And if we can, then we can get some of our leaders, and the sooner we get some of our leaders put into court and convicted of these crimes, the better. Only then will we really stop warfare. So I'm really committed to trying to ensure that our leaders answer for what they've done in court.
So like yesterday, we were saying about the, forgotten what I was going to say now. It'll come to me in a moment, sorry.
Do you want to go on to the other areas? I mean, that was trying to say that prosecution is very important. And the important bit for me is prosecuting taxpayers and tax collectors. And so what I would like to do is to ensure that, for instance, when an accountant, I mean, you're accountants, you know this, accountants raise huge sums of money for the government from their clients, if you like, by implementing the government's laws relating to taxation, and pass on to the revenue and customs huge sums of money. Now, all of that money, some of it, 10% of it, we know will be used for crimes of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, either now or in the future. It goes into planning for the crimes just as much as it goes into the crimes being committed every day. So every time an accountant acts on behalf of the government and asks and tells their clients that they need to pay this, this, and this in tax, they are committing, whether they are aware of it or not, a serious criminal offence. They are also encouraging their clients to commit a serious criminal offence. So what I'd like to see happening is to make this absolutely clear to the accountants. We need them to understand the laws of war, which are being broken by the government and which they are funding. If they do that, they can do the same sort of thing that individuals can do, which is to set up a trust for the tax money. So if we put the taxation that they would have passed on to the revenue and customs into a trust for the government and for the councils and the DVLA or whatever it is, on condition that the government uses the money solely for lawful purposes and never for criminal purposes such as warfare or medical genocide. Now, if we put a tight trust document up for those documents, and we can put the term of it to be the last day of the financial year, then on the last day of the financial year, say individuals have been having their PAYE and national insurance taken out, and that the company or the accountants are handing that money over to the government. If they put it in trust on the last day of the financial year, the employees get the PAYE and national insurance back, because they, as a secondary beneficiary to the trust, if the primary beneficiary has not stopped the killing, then they know it is a criminal offence if they hand it over, and therefore they have a duty never to hand that money over if they know it is going to be used for a criminal purpose. And at no point in the future can the government say, well, on such and such a date, you owed us this amount of money. Absolutely not. All taxes that are due from past to now, including sort of capital gains tax, inheritance tax, all those other things, every single one of those payments, if you hand it to the government, it's a criminal offence, whilst they have been using the money for criminal purposes. So at the end of the year, it's quite clear that it should go back to the individuals, and they should retain the money and withhold it from the government under all circumstances in future until the killing stops. We need that to happen via the accountants with every business in the country.
I just feel that it's going to put some individuals at risk of being kidnapped, and because people that are most vulnerable, because we have a state that attacks people who are vulnerable. And if people believe, I don't think we should say that we are not going to pay tax. I think we should.
No, I'm saying withhold it.
No, I know, but whatever it is, what I'm saying is that we want to make claims to recover the tax that has been extorted from us in the past, is because we did not know and consent to using our money for criminal purposes. And so it's called extortion when we didn't consent to it. And I think rather than saying, or we're withholding it, we're saying we are making a claim until the government pays us back. It can't ask us for any more because it owes it to us.
Well, we can do it that way. Yes, certainly. I think both things need to be done. So it's the current payments which are causing the problems currently. So we need to stop those, and if possible, to reclaim all the money that has been gone in the past. I just want to stop the flow of money to the government, which is used for criminal purposes. And both of those are valid ways of doing it. I don't think the point about I'm trying to make all along is to reduce the risk for the individual. Nobody, they cannot come in and take you or try to put you in prison or whatever it is for not paying tax, because you have paid it. It's very important to understand that when you put money into a trust, you pay your tax. I'm saying I pay my council tax, £2,000 a year, goes into the trust for the council, and you can have it as soon as you can prove that it'll be used lawfully, solely for lawful purposes. And I can never get it back if that happens. So they can't put anybody into prison for not paying tax. It is important to understand that we have paid it. When you pay it into a trust, it no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the trustees for the beneficiaries at that point. And it is only because you may be a secondary beneficiary, not a primary beneficiary, that you eventually get the money back. That is a lawful way of doing it in trust law. So it is important to reduce the risk. This reduces the risk for everybody. It is a passport to freedom for tax freedom, if you like. And you never need to get held to account for not paying it because you have paid it. Does that make sense?
Yes, what we're trying to do is trying to agree the memorandum and articles of association of our trusts and our cooperatives. So we would, we would have the national cooperatives and trusts, tax trusts, that would say, this is a procedure, but then we would have to negotiate it with the central government on behalf of the smaller local community trusts. So
I need to keep the two things separate, Neelu. The taxation trust system that I have set up so far is for individuals. We are now trying to set up, and let's keep the local community cooperatives separate from the taxation trust issues. So that we need community cooperatives in order to enable us to cooperate locally in communities. And when that takes over the role of the local government, if you like. The taxation trust is quite specifically focused solely on taxes and the flow of money to the government that is being used for criminal purposes. Now, we wouldn't have one national taxation trust overall. We may have a taxpayers cooperative to initiate thousands and millions of local individual taxation trusts, as well as regional, so local, regional, and taxation trusts, if you like. But I'm really not in favor of regional ones. It's more the corporate ones that need to be focused on. So individual and corporate trusts, and a corporate trust could be run by your local council for all residents of a particular council area. But that's the biggest size that we want to get to for any sort of joint action, independent joint action. Obviously, if we have 650 constituencies, all with one or two trusts, then they can work together, but they will be independent trusts. And depending on the trust deed of that particular council, they have to meet the conditions of that trust deed. We can't have one that applies to everybody in this country. So let's try and keep the things separate, but separate actions to bring about a better community. I'm not sure if that really helps, but over to you.
What's the procedure to set up a trust for an individual? Well,
we went through that on the first day. It's actually very simple. There are three components to any trust. That's the settler, who puts the money in, who settles money in trust, the trustee, and the beneficiary. And so you put money in trust, and the particular process that I've suggested is to put it in trust for the beneficiary being the government, but with conditions. And so in addition to having a standard trust, this is a conditional trust. And that's the important bit about this one, that for the first time, as far as I can find out, we are setting up conditional trusts based on upholding and enforcing the law, and that what gives it its real power. And the 4-page document that we went through on the first page, the Declaration of Sovereignty and Deed of Conditional Discretionary Revocable Trust, and withdrawal of consent to mandatory taxation, is your trust document. And when you have signed and witnessed that, and you've put the money, or 10% of the money, if you like, a proportion of it aside, you have started your trust. And that comes to an end on the end date, the revocable date, the date on which it can be revoked. And so we put the condition that if the government meets all our conditions before the 5th of April 2024, then it can have our taxes for this financial year. If it doesn't, then under no circumstances will we hand that money over.
So let's say, for a real example, I have a customer who earned £22,500 income. So the way you calculate the tax payable to the government is you deduct the 12,500 tax-free threshold, and you're liable for 20% on the balance. So 22,500 minus 12,500, That's 10,000 multiplied by 20% tax rate. So that person owes £2,000. Does the settler simply hold that money
I'd just like
in
to add a
hand,
couple. Yeah,
or do they,
I'd just like
or
to add
do
a
they
couple of things.
set up a separate?
It's not only that's income tax you're talking about there. Now there are 230 taxes that we pay all the time. Every time you make a mobile phone call, actually, you are paying money to the government, although you don't know it. But you do know, for instance, that you pay council tax. So not only do you need to withhold the income tax from the revenue and customs, but you need to withhold the council tax from the council, because you know that the council tax is government money. It goes into what's called a consolidated fund, along with all these other taxes, including income tax. And it's the total of all of those that you need to withhold. So if your guy has £2,000 income tax to pay and £2,000 council tax to pay, what you put in the top line is £4,000. Both of those payments are directly attributable to that individual. It's where it comes to the indirect taxes that we have a different approach. So for the personal taxes that you have to pay personally, then you put in the total figure for both those things, and it covers both council tax and income tax. You're muted at the time.
Does the person hold back in their private bank account the £4,000?
No.
Or do they have to set up a new bank account?
Yes.
And transfer the money into that new bank account to be held until the 5th of April?
Yes, it's very important that it is no longer your money. You have to put it somewhere else.
In a separate
You give
bank
it to your trustee. Now, if you are the trustee, you must keep it separate from your personal financial affairs, your personal account and so on. You can put it in a separate account if you've got one. You can even put it into a trust account if you can get one. But nowadays they've clamped down on that, and it's very difficult for individuals in this country to set up trust accounts. So one of the things you can do also is that you don't actually have to pay it all in cash straight away. Rather like councils ask you to pay it in 10 monthly sums, you can put the first of your total of, say, £4,000 total. You could put, say, 400 of that into a box in your in cash in cabinet at home, or put £40 cash and £360 as a check made out to the others, and so on. So there are different ways of holding the money, but it must be separate from you as the individual constituent, if you like, or a taxpayer.
And you could put right on the top of the box, you could put cash withheld until the 5th of April, the conditions are met.
Absolutely, yes.
And put tape, this box will be sealed until that date, and nobody can unseal the tape on that box. And you can sign your name across the tape and the box, the cardboard.
Absolutely. Or put it into a folder and do the same thing.
Yeah.
So a folder labeled trustee or whatever it is. But the important thing is to label it as trustee. So that it is you as a trustee operating the trust, and not you as a taxpayer borrowing money from the trust.
That's right.
I just don't think that people have got the capacity to understand how to manage this process, because there will be everyone will get robbed. There'll be workmen pretending to be looking for something and they'll just steal your cash.
I think that is very unlikely, Neelu. If it did happen, it would be 0.01% of the time. The majority of taxpayers can look after their cash and checks and other things and make sure they're in a safe place and that they belong to somebody else. I mean, you don't get robbed of your cash in your piggy bank every now and again, do you? By a workman. I think it's a realistic way of doing it, and I agree with Lee. I think, put it into your safe place, seal it, and then on the 5th of April next year, you can break the seal, and as trustee, you do what's written into the conditions of a trust. And if it says that you must pay the money to the government if they've met those conditions, you need to check whether the conditions have been met or not. And if they haven't, you then pay it to the secondary beneficiary.
You can even hire a box, a private box, a security box, and put the cash in that security box. If it's a big taxpayer who owes £1 million in tax, put all of that cash. I think Harrods are hiring out small security boxes within Harrods, so it's fully insured and protected.
Yeah, and there are a lot of firms that do that, actually. A lot of criminals put a lot of money in those sort of things. Yes.
Or even a bond, they could put the money into a bond, an interest-bearing bond, and then put it into a security box.
Yes. One of the other benefits is that, or processes that you can do, is if you have an accountant, ask the accountant to open up the trust for you, and you could pay him a small amount for that or some amount, and they could put it into their client's account and whatever, and act as trustee. So you don't always have to be your own trustee. I do recommend it because it gives you the authority to run this country, basically. If you pass on your authority to other people, you are just one step away from your sovereignty in a way.
You could go to your auntie or your uncle and you can hand them the £4,000, and then they could act as a trustee for that money until the 5th of April.
Yes.
And you could give them the box with your signed 4-page document, and with the tape around it, and your name is signed, and they can secure that for you.
Yes, absolutely. And I would recommend not putting in all in cash. I do think it's a good idea to put it in both as some cash, a check for a post-dated check, for instance,
a check,
or a promissory note, a recoverable promissory note, which is applicable. All of those are potential ways of paying the taxation debt. So I think it's important, actually, that's the personal way of doing it. But what I would really encourage is for accountants throughout the country to understand this information and then start to advise their clients, whatever size the company is, or their individual, however much money their individuals have, they need to advise them that it is a criminal offense to pay tax, and that now they need to put the money in trust for the government, for the council, for the DVLA or whatever it is, and to hold that money until the government meets its conditions. Now, if this is done by an accountant for a large organization, they can set up 2 or 3 and maybe 4 different trusts on behalf of the employees, the clients, and maybe the shareholders. And it's just as much a criminal offense for a company director to hand over company money to the Revenue and Customs as it is for an individual to pay their council tax. So company directors and others in companies need to know and understand these laws apply to them, and they, because the sums of money concerned are very much bigger than the individual amounts, they could be the first people to suffer if we take people to court for conduct ancillary to genocide or fundraising for the purposes of terrorism under the two laws that we mentioned earlier. Therefore, I think this is the way forward, is to persuade accountants and lawyers throughout the country to start to operate, to uphold and enforce the law against funding crime.
Yes, I remember now the question I was going to ask you. Was
Yep.
that the 4-page document that we fill out?
Yes.
I think you said we keep it, but should we serve it on the council, say it's council tax? Do we have to copy it to other people?
Yes, and that will always keep the copy, the original, sorry, always keep the original with the money in your box or folder. That is the instructions to you as the trustee, or to somebody else as the trustee, if you have somebody else being the trustee. So you never get rid of the original. Always send a photocopy or a copy of some sort, a photocopy ideally, if you want to send it, because you have to send a photocopy of it to the beneficiaries, so they know the conditions they're going to have to meet if they want your money. So it's important to send a copy to the Revenue and Customs and a copy to the council or to the DVLA, if those are the people who are in your trust, who are the beneficiaries of your trust.
So does that include car tax, road tax?
Yeah, all taxes. Yeah, road tax, fines from a court. It includes repayment of student loans. It includes petrol taxes and
Parking.
Virtually everything. Sorry, Lee, what were you?
I just said it would include parking penalties.
Yeah.
It would include even the VAT that you pay your mobile phone provider as well. If you're with O2 or 3, there's VAT payable every month that you could reclaim back to yourself.
Absolutely. And also, it's important to know that the energy companies and your energy bills all carry VAT. And it's a criminal offense to pay an energy bill if you know that they're going to pay 5% of it or whatever it is they charge to the government. In fact, they pay much more than that, because you know that the people in the energy company are being paid, and they will have PAYE and national insurance taken off their salaries for which you have paid and handed to the Revenue and Customs. So the total amount of money that an energy company will give to the government will be a lot more than 5%. It'll be probably 25 or 30% of the total. So you must legally, ethically, withhold the whole lot, because until you get a guarantee from the energy company that none of the money will go to the government in the future, when they give you that guarantee, then you can pay your energy bill.
I'm just wondering, is there a covering letter to go with the 4-page document, Chris?
There's a lot of them, yes. It depends who you're sending them to and which stage of the process you're at, so that we've got a number of covering letters. So, for instance, there is a covering letter for an employee to send to their employer, pointing this out and ask him to set up a trust or whatever. There are covering letters to go to the council, to the Revenue and Customs in the first place. And then when you get a response from the council, which totally ignores everything you've said, there's another letter you can send to them saying, look, you haven't answered any of my questions. Or whatever. So there's a number of covering letters, and people are making up really good ones all the time. And so we can try to get some of these examples sent around. They're very useful, actually.
And are they public domain? And could I share them? Could I
Yes,
have them?
please do. Yes. And one of the things I suggested is I wrote a couple of articles. One of them is called Lawful Tax Resistance, which is about 3 pages, which I don't know if you've had it or not, but that sort of tries to outline what's going on, the fact that our government has been breaking the law, and that we have a lawful duty in law to withhold tax, and this is how to do it. So people don't know this. I mean, the real problem we've had over the last 100 years is that our government has not informed the people of the laws it has agreed to with the rest of the world, and the implications for us as individual citizens of those laws. And they completely fail to inform us of the world's most important laws. So we need to get that information out.
It would be easy for people just to have templates, be given templates. Yes. Already written, pre-written letters to councils, to energy companies and to HMRC, and people can just basically just put their name on those template letters and sign it, attach it to the 4-page document and post it off.
Absolutely.
And then it would be, I think we could put those template letters onto a website. People can print them straight off the website. And also we could get memorandum and articles from other cooperatives, of which you said there were about 7,000 of them already, and yes, we can adopt those existing memorandums to our purposes from a multi-structured limited liability cooperative. Yeah,
absolutely. We have 1 or 2 of those. I mean, this is where Cooperatives UK are very useful. They have a standard multi-stakeholder limited liability community co-op. Co-op. I'm not sure if it's a community co-op. I think it's community co-op template for articles of association and the memorandum and articles of association of this item. We have one. We made one up, slight adjustments for the Hastings and Rye Community Co-op. All of these are available to people, and yes, use them as a template for setting up local community co-ops. Now that's what's happening, and I know 1 or 2 organizations are making a few adjustments, so quite rightly too. You know, it's not a totally unproof document. I mean, it's not laid out 100% right. You need to adapt it to your own purposes. But yes, the top standard letters and standard documentation is really what we're trying to do with that 4-page declaration of sovereignty and deed of trust. Is if 10,000 of us keep to that declaration, then we can make sure that 10,000 of us can work against the government, because we've all got the same deed of trust with the same wording and the same conditions. And so the more we do that, the greater power we have. If we all set up our own trusts with our own conditions, then we can't be quite so powerful as a group, because we're all different in that sense legally. So anyway, yeah, it's a very good idea to have templates, and we can provide those.
Yeah, and so when the council will not respond on the last day of the tax year, they just ignore you. So is that the point at which you say, well, I didn't get a response?
Yes, I mean, basically yes, I mean, if you get no response at all, I have said this is what's happened to me for 6 years. They've just given up responding to me. They just send me the standard letters every time, and I've stopped responding to those because they never respond to mine, and I just ignore it now. So yeah, you can send it at whatever time, but it is sensible to do it on the last day of the year and say, look, this is what has happened. You no longer have any right to any of my money for this past financial year, and you will not have any right to it until you act lawfully.
Right. So is that a good point to stop? Because I know you've got another.
I have to go in about 10 minutes at the latest.
Right, right. So any more questions, Lee, on that one? On that point?
That's very clear, Chris. And we need to do a quick review of your website, which is still stored and existing on archive. And do you want us to help you prepare a new website?
That would be marvelous. Yes, I'm looking for help right now to sort of a good web design. I mean, one of the problems with this is that the wording of it and the presentation of it in images and words needs to be pretty good, because this is new stuff to everybody. And a lot of words confuses people, and you know, it's just like the small print in an insurance document or whatever. People very rarely read it all or understand it all, and so even that 4-page thing, which is trying to be as concise and yet relevant as possible, is quite difficult for people, and it may be 2 or 3 times they have to read it through before they fully understand it. So yes, it would be very helpful.
So if I just summarize that, a 4-page document declaring your sovereignty is the document that you keep the original, you scan it, and you can email it to whoever asks you for money, and you say that you're waiting for proof with a covering letter to say, put to relevant, appropriate covering letter to say that you're waiting for proof that the ongoing breaches of the UN Charter by this member state.
It's breaches of the 2 domestic criminal laws that we are actually basing this on. So it's the Terrorism Act 2000 and the International Criminal Court Act 2001.
Okay, great. So then those covering letters and the scans will go to those people asking you for money, like HMRC, DVLA,
councils and so on.
Council tax, yeah. And then you wait till the day before the end of the financial year, and if you don't hear from them, then would you just make another declaration, say, of not having heard from them on this date, now this money is now belonging back to where?
That is the original 4-page document, and you will see on the last column of it, you are the secondary beneficiary. So the money gets to the secondary beneficiary. So it comes back to you, and it's preferable probably to sign a new declaration and deed on the 6th of April or thereabouts for the following year, because your tax liabilities will be different, and a different sum of money and so on. And you can then either roll over what you've already got in your strongbox or set up a new one.
And it's okay not to use cash. It's okay to put a piece of paper with a promissory note on it.
Yes, I mean, some people have just done that. I think a little bit of everything is helpful. It can prove to a court, if this ever goes to court, and it's most unlikely, but that you have paid some money towards the bill. And that's all you have to do, is to show you have paid a consideration in law.
Okay, that's great. That's straightforward enough.
You could even write out a check from your private bank account of just put £2,000 check.
That's good enough, yes.
Good enough.
Post date it to the last day, 5th of April or something like that.
Payable to the local council and
One to the
signed.
council, one to the Revenue and Customs, whatever
Yes,
it is.
you could write out 4 different checks to
Yes.
each party that you estimate. It'll be estimated amounts that you owe anyhow.
Yes.
So it'll be a check to HMRC, a check to, Grundig Council, local council. It'll be
Yeah, so could we then scan those checks and send them to those relevant people and say, look, here is the proof that I've paid you?
I mean, you could try that. I don't know whether that's a good idea or not. I mean, it sounds good.
You could attach it to the 4-page document.
Promissory note.
The important thing is to keep the original check and the promissory note and the documentation, the declaration and deed. Keep that in the trustee folder, and you must keep that yourself, or give it to your trustee,
or give it to your accountant
if they are trustee.
Right.
Only, but it's for the trustee, and so label it trustee. And most of them will be for you as a trustee of your own trust. But some of them will be for whoever, your uncle and aunt, or whoever decides to or agrees to act as your trustee, including your accountant.
So you could handwrite out a contract between you and, let's say, your auntie, and you can say, I Lee Cant, appoint Mrs. Elizabeth Brown,
yes,
to be my trustee and to hold this box which contains legal documents and checks payable to beneficiaries for taxes. And this
they need roughly that's correct. And the important thing is that they need to understand the trust document, so they will uphold the conditions in the trust, and they need to agree to do that.
They agree to do that, and they sign their name on the contract.
That'd be helpful, and you can pay them for that if they are your accountant or whatever it is, if you don't want to do it yourself. I must go quite soon.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a great point to end. So thank you very much.
Another Zoom on next Wednesday at 9.
Let me just, I should think that's okay. Let me just check my diary.
An hour.
I'll stop recording for now anyway. Thank you very much. So just stop the recording.